Welcome into the 49er Access podcast, and you have made it to NFL Draft Week. We are officially here. This is technically my beginning point of the 2024-2025 NFL season, where you can put last season far in the past and focus towards another year of San Francisco 49ers football. And to do that, I am going to bring you my final 49ers 7-round 2024 NFL mock draft. We have done a total of 3 on this channel. I did one with Larry Krueger on the Krug Show, his channel. So go ahead and check that out as well. And look, this is going to be a mixing, a culmination of my opinion, my thoughts, and I'm also going to try to get into the brain and get into the mindset of John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and the Niners scouting department. So there may be some picks that I just wouldn't do, but San Francisco might pull the trigger on. There may be some picks we agree on, and there may be picks that I say, look, I love this player, and San Francisco may indeed not. As you can see in front of you, if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or X, we have the Pro Football Network mock draft simulator on the screen. And the number 1 pick has already been finitoed, announced on the board. It is Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. And without further ado, let's begin our final mock draft of the 2024 mock draft season. We have people in the chat, Niner Media, saying hello. Bobo, shouldn't they draft Trent Williams' replacement? A lot of conversations of tackles and cornerbacks and safeties and linebackers and edge rushers. San Francisco has 10 picks to work with. I don't think they'll use all 10. We'll dive into why I believe so. The Niners do have 22 first-round grades on players. And they also have 16 gold helmet players, meaning they have 16 players in which they love, are bona fide, should be great players. They want to get in the building, players they want to target. Essentially, think of it this way. A gold helmet basically means a blue chipper, someone they like, someone they love, a prospect they're infatuated with, that if they get him inside the building, it's a win for them. Now, that doesn't mean the 16 come from the 22 they have mocked in the first round. It just means 16 throughout the entirety of the draft. John Lynch talked today about this. But before we dive into it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let's dive into our final 2024 NFL mock draft, all 7 rounds of the San Francisco 49ers. Again, pick 1 is Caleb Williams. Pick 2 is Jaden Daniels. Drake May goes 3. Brock Bowers goes 4 to the Cardinals. Wouldn't that be crazy? Trey McBride and Brock Bowers in the same offense at the same position. A lot of fun will be had in Arizona. But we're sitting here still at pick 31 at the back end of the first round, and we'll see how the draft board falls to us. The first round is one of those where, let's pause it here at pick 25. The Packers are on the board. There are a handful of players that can see San Francisco in a way wanting to move up for. Johnny Newton's there, the D tackle from Illinois. Some have him falling to San Francisco at 31. On the Krug Show with Larry Krueger, I picked Johnny Newton at 31, so it's certainly a possibility there. For whatever reason, Byron Murphy has been falling on the PFN mock draft simulator, but there are reports in real life that he may go inside the top 8. So who knows? Nate Wiggins is on the board still at pick 25. The Niners apparently, according to Matt Mayoko, had a top 30 visit with him. Certainly an intriguing prospect to look at, but again, we're at pick 25. A lot of the tackles are already off the board. Graham Barton is still there on the board at pick 25. Jackson Powers-Johnson is also there. One note I do want to make before diving into our first-round pick at pick 31 is that if there's a player that I think is not going to be on the board at, let's say, pick 31, and I think will get picked prior to, I'm not going to take them simply because I want to have an element of realism. Now I'll explain why when we get there, but I do want to add that tidbit into if, let's say, for whatever reason, Marvin Harrison Jr. dropped to 31, I would say there's no way he's dropping to 31. So I'll explain if there's a prospect there, but let's resume the draft board. Byron Murphy goes to the Packers. Nate Wiggins goes to Tampa Bay. Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, Chop Robinson, and Kingsley Suamataia goes to the Ravens. The Broncos want to trade. I don't love this. I'll be to get a first-round pick next year. Seattle offered us a trade. It's a lot of picks. Don't love it. I don't think San Francisco trades back at pick 31 unless it's a wow offer that keeps them somewhere close in the 30s, early 40s. But that leaves us with this really obscure, really awkward draft board of you have Johnny Newton, pick 21. Then there's also Graham Barton here, center, guard, could be a tackle in the NFL, but is mainly a guard, interior offensive lineman from Duke. Jackson Powers Johnson's on the board still, so two of the best interior offensive linemen still on the board for San Francisco. Christian Haynes is still there. Jordan Morgan is still there. I am someone who came into this draft with the idea that the Niners are likely, in my opinion, going to target at pick 31 BYU offensive lineman Kingsley Suamataia. I think when you look at what San Francisco likes, there are plenty of offensive linemen, tackles specifically in this draft. Tyler Guyton, Suamataia, Jordan Morgan, Fontenot. Plenty of guys that would instantly improve San Francisco's offensive line. But I don't think Graham Barton's going to be there at 31. I would be blown away if Jackson Powers Johnson's there at 31. So I'm going to erase them from the board. That being said, if they're there, especially Graham Barton, you would take them in a heartbeat. But I don't think they are going to be on the board at 31. Like, when I see this draft board, I have a hard time believing that, players like Keon Coleman, Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy all go in the first round. I think 1 to 2 of those guys fall to the second. I also believe that there is a chance Michael Penix goes in the first round, which would certainly push some of these players out of the first round. I think Brock Bowers going to the Cardinals at 4 certainly made the top 5 very interesting. Thus, players like Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson have slidden down 231. So I don't think they'll be there, so I'm not going to draft them. I just want to clarify as to why I'm not going to take them on the draft board. But I do want to dive into Kingsley Suamataia because I'm someone who in previous mock drafts has taken Graham Barton, who has taken Jordan Morgan, who's still there on the board. And I like both those players a lot. I love Graham Barton. I like Jordan Morgan. I just believe that Kingsley Suamataia, with what he brings to the table, although very similar to Jordan Morgan, he's 6'4", 330 pounds. He can play tackle. He can play guard. Doesn't have the arm length concerns Jordan Morgan might out of Arizona. Morgan has, 32 7/8 inch arms. Kingsley Suamataia has 34 1/4 inch arms. So a slight difference, but noticeable when it comes to playing tackle. I think Suamataia will probably be a second or third round pick. Likely wouldn't go 30, but let's say that the Ravens did pick him at 30. He's off the board. He's extremely athletic for his size. Again, 6'4", 330, only 21 years old. He's young. He's coachable. There is more room to grow in his game. He has good play strength. The footwork in pass protection needs some work, but I do think that for a player his size that has amazing core strength, you cannot bull rush Kingsley Suamataia. And if the plan is to have him play guard once John Feliciano is retired, or maybe have him play tackle for a year, then slide inside, or vice versa, you cannot bull rush him, which gives him a bigger impact playing the interior, aka guard, for the Niners offensive line. I think if he sat for a year, he'd benefit from that, but also playing guard in this offense, knowing that Feliciano is gone after this year. Aaron Banks could be gone after this year for guards, but also in a year or so, Trent Williams could be gone. I think Sumate is probably a better right tackle than left tackle. But again, Colton McKivitz is signed through next year. So there is some flexibility with Sumate in year one. He can play guard, can play tackle, and I think would be just fine. And I think where he lacks the awareness, the pass protection, footwork, I think with him being so coachable, I think San Francisco would have Sumate over a player like Jordan Morgan, and probably just behind certain players like Graham Barton and Jackson Powers Johnson as to where their preferred offensive lineman might be. I wouldn't be surprised if Kingsley Sumate is higher on their draft board than even Tyler Guyton. Now, all that said, this isn't how our draft board fell. We're at pick 31. Kingsley Sumate is not there. Tyler Guyton's not there. We're not going to pick Graham Barton. We're not going to pick Jackson Powers Johnson because they're likely not going to be there, although if they were there, you'd certainly want Graham Barton on the offensive line. For the sake of the rumor mill, what's been transpiring recently with the Niners and with the rumors amongst the entire NFL, there's a lot of talk of Johnny Newton falling 231. And I think that has caught the eye of the rest of teams of how could he fall past the Dolphins at, 21, right? I have a hard time believing that would happen, but over a player like Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson, the likelihood I think is higher that Johnny Newton falls compared to Barton or Powers Johnson. But when talking about Johnny Newton, I think when you dive into who he is as a player, you can look at what PFN says about him here. Let's see if they can bring it up for a second. He's 6'1", 304 pounds. The common pro comp to him is Javon Hargrave. Creates natural leverage. He's extremely fast, an amazing first step. He can play 5, he can play 7 tech. He's someone that you can line up next to Javon Hargrave, and you'd feel pretty good about it. I'm also someone who believes that you can like a player like Jaden Cremudi in the 7th or 6th round. There's players like Mekhi Wingo, Logan Lee, Michael Hall. You can probably get in the 2nd through the 5th round that might be able to impact your roster. Chris Jenkins will be there. It just comes down to what you preference. Again, if it was me, and I'm hoping Kingsley Sumate is there. That's who I want to pick at pick 31 if I'm the Niners. And because we're not picking Barton or Powers Johnson, I would easily lean towards going, yep, there's Johnny Newton. In a year's time when Malik Collins is off the roster because his contract's 1 year fully guaranteed, next year's not guaranteed at all. Jordan Elliott's a run defender. You put Johnny Newton on this defensive line. You arguably already have Hargrave and Bosa, 2 elite players at the position, top 10 guys. Bosa maybe the best one as an edge rusher. You give me durability, Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, the ability to still add later on in the draft at edge rusher. You put Johnny Newton in that rotation with Malik Collins, with Jordan Elliott, and with Kevin Gibbons and Kalia Davis, and you add not just depth, you add starting star caliber prospect talent. I wouldn't be surprised if one of San Francisco's golden helmets is Johnny Newton from Illinois. He's just that good. He's a player that in 2-3 years' time could give you 10.5 sacks, could be your Javon Hargrave replacement once he's about 34, 35 years old in his contract. And I do think that it would be pretty foolish for the Niners, whether it's Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson, or in this case, Johnny Newton, if they are there, you would need to talk yourself out of that pick more than talking yourself into that pick. And so we're going to take Johnny Newton here. Again, simply because Kingsley Sumate is off the board at pick 30 to the Ravens, and I don't believe Graham Barton or Jackson Powers Johnson is going to be there. And Johnny Newton is a name rumored to be falling down the draft board and expected to go around pick 27, 21, all the way to 32 to the Chiefs. So we'll go Johnny Newton here, get ourselves a defensive tackle, which ironically is not really a position of need on the Niners, which in a way fits their motto of how they draft. So Johnny Newton is pick 31, the San Francisco 49ers, and Jordan Morgan goes 32 to the Chiefs, and Graham Barton goes pick 33 to the Carolina Panthers, which he shouldn't be there on draft night. Jackson Powers Johnson goes to the Patriots. Xavier Legette goes 36 to Washington. And let's see how this board falls. Chris Braswell, who I think could be a target of the Niners, be a trade up in the second round, goes 39 to the Panthers. So the Panthers get Braswell and Graham Barton in the second round. A great haul for them, a young team building up their team. TJ Tampa, wildly overdrafted by the Houston Texans at pick 42. Max Melton, who I think Niner fans really like, goes to the Falcons, and Ladd McConkey goes to the Jaguars. Christian Haynes here, though, goes 45 to the Saints, offensive lineman from UConn. There is a lot of talk amongst Niner fans that Christian Haynes could be a player that if San Francisco indeed goes defense, whether it's cornerback, edge rusher, or defensive tackle, could be a target for them in the second round. Of course, there are names like Bo Limmer and Zach Frazier. I am someone who, when I see Christian Haynes play, I go, wow, he is, if not the best, one of the best wide zone blockers in the entire draft class. I think he's the second best run blocker in the entire draft class. He can go to the second level with ease. He's hyper athletic. He's a good pass blocker. There are some inconsistencies with his anchor, but overall, if San Francisco walked away with, let's say it's, excuse me, let's say it's Johnny Newton, and if Christian Haynes fell down at a certain point, let's say to around late 40s, early 50s, I can see them making a trade up to try to get Christian Haynes on their team. He's extremely good. He would be, if Graham Barton's here, Christian Haynes is right under him in regards to being the best interior offensive lineman in this draft. He's that good. I also wouldn't be shocked if San Francisco is sitting there at 31 and if Sua Matea is gone, or they see Sua Matea as a guard, not a tackle. I can see them saying, Christian Haynes is still there at 31. Johnny Newton's gone. Graham Barton's gone. We want to get the best or second best guard in this class. Let's not go after Jordan Morgan, Sua Matea. Let's get Christian Haynes at 31. And I can see Niner fans being so angry and pissed off, saying, are you serious? It wasn't a tackle. But I do think you would instantly improve your offensive line with him, where if Banks is gone in 1 year's time, or if Feliciano and Burford are gone in a year or so, you'd say, yep, they got the second best offensive lineman on the interior in the entire class and didn't have to pay up for them. It's a really good pick in this case by the Saints. But we're still sitting here. Our next pick is at 63. Jalen Polk has just gone. Michael Penix, which again, you can never predict mock drafts. Michael Penix, in an offseason in which the Steelers have acquired Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, have also drafted Michael Penix at pick 51. The NFL is absolutely crazy. But again, we shall see what happens. Let's look at potentially trading up, though, because I do think there is a position in this draft where I don't know. It's like, for as deep as the receiver class is this year, which is really deep, right? There are certain players that only fit certain schemes, like Malachi Corley, who I like a lot, is essentially Deebo Samuel light. Isn't as good of a route runner, is more of a running back than Deebo was. Similar play styles, strengths, now what they do. He would fit what San Francisco likes to do a lot. That said, it all depends on the Brenden Aiyuk situation. He's not getting traded here. I don't think he's getting traded in real life, but I do think that it would benefit the Niners to finding the right receiver for their system. And I think there is one that stands out above all of them. His name is not Brenden Rice, despite John Lynch saying that he does value bloodlines, hence Frank Gore Jr., hence Luke McCaffrey, and hence Brenden Rice, receiver from USC. I am someone who, while understands bloodlines are great, connections are great, I am someone who is completely and has fallen head over heels in love with Ricky Pearsall. I think he is the best, maybe second best route runner in the entire draft. He has great speed, some of the best hands in the entire class. He is someone that doesn't catch with his body. He uses his hands extremely well. He can play in the slot, can play outside, can win in the slot, can win outside, and can also win over the middle. And again, he's one of the best separators in this class. And in an offense where Shanahan himself is known to scheme players open, I also think you want to have a player like Brandon Aiyuk that can get open by themselves. Ricky Pearsall is that kind of player that if he is there at 63, you take him instantly and say, wow, the NFL let him fall to us. He's a little smaller, and at times he will have issues with more physical cornerbacks, but he plays a slot. There aren't many big slot cornerbacks or nickelbacks for that much. So I do think that if he plays slot receiver, he's not going to have those problems. And again, if Kyle Shanahan can get you open, but if you can get yourself open, that's only going to help Brock Purdy even more. Where if Aiyuk's double covered and Deebo's double covered, and for whatever reason George Kittle's in the backfield still in the Super Bowl, you have yourself a third receiver, not named Juwan Jennings, who's your big slot guy and your big clutch playmaker. You have someone like Ricky Pearsall, who's smaller, but he's so fast. Incredible separation. And I think would just be the perfect fit in this offense. That being said, you can go look at tackle. Roger Rosengarten is still there. I think San Francisco likes him a lot. From Washington, Cooper Beebe's still there. There are some players you can look at and say, yep, like there's a lot of fits here for the Niners. That would make a lot of sense. You can go to edge. Marshawn Nealon's there, who I do know San Francisco likes a lot for fact. Mike Sainristil has climbed up draft boards in the last couple of days. There's talks that at 31, he can go to San Francisco at the earliest. I'm someone who, I'm forgetting the show I did it for, but I did a voicemail pick for the Niners at pick 31, and there was about 4 cornerbacks off the board in the first round, and I was like, look, like I'm scared to miss out on a player like Sainristil from Michigan. I said, you have to pull the trigger now when you like a player. I do think at this point in the second round, you can afford to wait somewhat, but when you're looking at teams that might want to draft a receiver, the Cowboys, the Buccaneers, the Bills are there. Like you may want to get ahead. The Lions, who lost Josh Reynolds, could want some help. The Ravens even too. Like there are a handful of teams you might want to get ahead of, and you can value a player like Corley. I don't think Corley fits in with the Bills or the Texans. Packers make sense, but they're kind of loaded there at receiver. But I love Ricky Pearsall, and I don't want him going to a team like the Bucs, like the Cowboys. I would call the Dolphins, and I would say, look, I would say you are loaded at receiver. You have you have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, like you have, I think Braxton Berrios is still there. You have River Craycraft, like you're not hurting for a receiver. And I'd call him up and I'd say, look, I'll give you pick 63 and I'll give you pick 132. Or in fact, I'll give you pick 124. I have no problem sitting there waiting for a little bit. I want to get Ricky Pearsall. And I would even throw in pick 215, 211, give them something to cling to and say, look, you're only moving back 8 spots. You gain a middle round pick. You don't pick until 158 anyways. McDaniel, Shanahan ties. Let's see if they take this trade. They may not. We'll certainly see. The drafts can be a little fickle. They have accepted the trip. You got to be aggressive. Go get Ricky Pearsall and give Brock Purdy another weapon to go. Now you have a defensive tackle. You have a second-round receiver. And I know we're sitting there, no offensive lineman just yet, but I think you've become extremely deadly on the trenches, and you've aided your young quarterback in Brock Purdy. Because look, in 1 year's time, you could be sitting there and Deebo Samuel's gone. You could be sitting there maybe in 2 years' time if Aiyuk plays on the fifth-year option. Maybe he's also gone. Some long view thoughts involved in trading up for Pearsall, but I do think when you have a separator like him, who's a great route runner, I think of the guys, Roman Wilson, McMillan from Washington, Brenden Rice, who they like a lot, Malik Washington, I do think that Ricky Pearsall could avoid the dreaded Shanahan doghouse over those players. And I get it. There's bloodlines. Every mock draft I do, it's where are the legacy draft picks? Where is Brenden Rice? Where is Luke McCaffrey? You didn't draft Frank Gore Jr., who's like 5'7", and will probably be an undrafted free agent in the first round. Why? This is why. You have to be smart with your picks, understand where the value is. Now we're back on the board here at pick 93 or 94, excuse me. I think the most obvious position of need would be offensive tackle. But if you want to get nuts, you want to get crazy with it, you could be and make the obvious pick here and go Andrew Phillips. I have mocked him for, I think, 2 of the 3 mock drafts I've done. I'm someone who the scouting report has not changed on. We can also talk about Kyrie Jackson, but Andrew Phillips from Kentucky, nickelback flexibility, probably the best, and again, if not the best, number 2 coverage cornerback in regards to playing nickel in the entire draft class. Mike Sammer still is there, but Phillips is a much better coverage cornerback than Sammer still is from Michigan. I think Phillips would instantly give you the flexibility to play Lenoir on the outside. If you don't love Phillips in regards to his tackling, which, let's be honest, is not that good, you could take him off on the field on base downs or 3rd and short and put Yadam on the field. Ambry Thomas can go out there and play. If you like one of those guys, my point is you can mix and match with your cornerbacks and play this, the strategic game with the opposing offense and give Nick Sorensen and give Brandon Staley a little more firepower to utilize when it comes to blitzing and coverages with your defensive backs. And look, let's be honest here. With the scheme change, the reversion back to what they used to do pre-Steve Wilkes, yes, you have to tackle. We know this. But having the ability to cover with this now read and react style of defense and attack with Bosa, Johnny Newton, Javon Hargrave, Leonard Floyd, Gross Matos, Drake Jackson, and company, with that attacking vaunted front 7, you have to be able to cover, where I do think Andrew Phillips, who's 5'10", 191, super physical, hard to beat vertically, can mirror most routes, good mental processor, fluid hips. Like, if you have an insane coverage cornerback guarding Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, guarding Lockett, a JSN from Seattle, insert whoever else the Cardinals draft in this class, you're now looking at your secondary saying, wow, like they're going to be able to not just cover guys, but we're going to also have more coverage sacks this year. We're going to give our defensive line more time to get into the backfield, where let's say it's Lenoir playing nickelback. He's great. I love Lenoir. Pay him now. I'm cool with that. But then you also have to rely on Yadam or Ambry Thomas to play outside. And I do think that there are some drawbacks to being able to have a read and react defense with Ambry Thomas out there. he's going to get beat at times. He plays off receivers and plays this soft zone too often because once he gets beat, he gets scared and gets nervous of, I don't want it to happen again. Andrew Phillips will give you the biggest, F you middle finger saying, I dare you to target me again if he gets beat once. I do think that, again, there is some concerns of his run defense. Isn't a great tackler. He plays a little smaller for his size in the run defense game. So, again, there are some concerns, but they like him a lot. That's certainly an option here at pick 94. PFN has him as, on their big board of pick 86, so it's certainly an option for them. But for the folks that want to go offensive line, I would not wave my hand and say, why? Because I can see him, and I'm sure you can see him too, if I can get this laptop to work. Blake Fisher from Notre Dame is still on the board at pick 94. They have him at pick 109 on their big board, but I think Blake Fisher, knowing Kyle Shanahan has drafted two, not one, but two Notre Dame Fighting Irish offensive linemen in the first and second round, McGlinchey and Aaron Banks being those two players, I would not be surprised if there isn't somewhat of an infatuation with him in the second or third round. I think what Blake Fisher does, athletic, he has good awareness. There isn't really many weaknesses with him. He is as close as you can get to a bona fide, just solid player out of the draft. When you talk about these, the ceiling isn't too high, but the floor is really high where it's like you can get a B-plus player in the second, third, maybe the fourth round if he falls that far. Refined pass blocker, good enough anchor. He's athletic, but he isn't the best athlete, if that makes sense. He has good get off, good pad level, knows how to use his hands and sustain blocks against defenders. I think he'd fit more at right tackle than left tackle, which if he could play left tackle, he'd probably be a second or third or first round pick. But I could easily see them buying into Blake Fisher. But I think it would be foolish of us to look at the secondary and not draft Andrew Phillips. There is a real conversation to be had that there are a lot of safeties in this class that could play nickelback or have played nickelback in college and might be able to do the same thing in the NFL. One comes to mind. It's Tyke Smith from Georgia. Now, San Francisco has talked to or visited with Javon Bullard from Georgia, I believe. They've also talked to Kalen Bullocks from USC. But Tyke Smith is 5'10", 205 pounds, 4.46 speed, compact, strong player. He can run through tight ends and slot receivers. Really good tackler towards the sideline and on screens. Like, he's a player that, he may be a, quote unquote safety in mock drafts on draft boards, but I really would not be surprised if he's playing nickelback in the NFL. There are some people that look at him, and I think it was Marcus Whitman on that franchise guy mentioned that he reminds him of Javon Holland from the Dolphins or Antoine Winfield from the Buccaneers, where it's like, this guy is a safety, but you can play him at the nickel and you can play in the box and he'd be okay. He is super physical. Someone that, again, he's 5'10", 205, whereas Andrew Phillips is like 5'10", 180, something like that. Like, you gain 20 pounds, a more physical nickelback if you want to play him there. He's probably free safety slot cornerback, which could give, if San Francisco is leaning towards it being out on Talanoa Hufanga, could give them someone too. And, this high safety flexibility of, if you want to play three safeties, you want to mix and match. Jair Brown can become your strong safety in a year. And Tyke Smith can go back to play free safety. It's certainly a conversation to be had. and I wouldn't put it past San Francisco from looking at that as an option. All that to say, we are going to draft Andrew Phillips here at pick 94. Get our nickel back. We're going to have a defensive tackle, Johnny Newton, an A pick in my mind. You're going to have Ricky Pearsall, an excellent receiver in the second round who you traded up for, and you get a nickel back. I mean, I don't want to sound crazy, but you're going to have 3 starting players in your first 3 picks. I think it would just be a bona fide win if you are the Niners of like, hey, like we have got this thing on lock. Blake Fisher goes to the Steelers. Brenden Rice goes to the Eagles of all people. So that rivalry will still be embedded in us from last year in the past couple years with Philadelphia. Jaden Hicks, who I love, goes to the Giants. Jermaine Burton, who is a great receiver but has a lot of character issues, goes to Atlanta. Jordan Travis, quarterback, Florida State, goes to Washington. They get 2 quarterbacks in this mock draft. They pull the old RG3 and Kirk Cousins, I guess you could say. Tyke Smith goes to the Eagles, who we just talked about. I think Philadelphia looks, their draft in that last couple of picks was really good there. T'Vondre Sweat, who falls all the way to the 4th round, goes to the Lions. And now we're sitting here at pick 132. And again, we have no offensive linemen yet. Now we do pick at 135. We've already gotten our receiver. We've already gotten our nickel back and our defensive lineman. You don't want to get into this, you have to pick by position, middle rounds, or you get the best player available and you just go for it, right? I think the Niners find themselves in this draft, like John Lynch said it himself, we don't really have a lot of needs. We just don't. Like we are a really good team, and if they walked into this year with the exact same roster as last year, what they have right now, I can guarantee you they would still be the Super Bowl favorite coming into the year because they're loaded everywhere. Now, the word not having many needs in quotations, they do have some needs. Now, I'm sure in the mock draft, we're sitting back like, you've only filled one of them, and that's cornerback. And there's a conversation that could be had of, well, you've signed, Yadam, you signed Rock Ya-Sin, you've added Chase Lucas. Like, they may not want to draft a cornerback that early. Totally understand it. But I think the 3 players that we got, while they may not have the word positional need next to them, I think when it comes to getting better, getting stronger at the top with players that can also carry you through the next couple contracts you don't want to sign of big players, you give me Hargrave and Newton and Phillips, and you give me Mooney Ward and Lenore, you give me Pearsall and Deebo and Aiyuk for at least 1 year. You're going to have some fun. And the idea of in a couple years, these guys could be stars at a certain time. But I do think you're at pick 132. You can get the biggest bang for your buck if you were smart here. I am someone who has a hard time believing that Christian Jones, Texas tackle, falls all the way to the 4th round. He feels like a day 2 player to me. With that said, he's still there. We can certainly talk about him. There is, I think his name is Matt Goncalves from Pittsburgh. If it's wrong, I apologize. Offensive tackle. Let's dive into the offensive lineman because I just wrapped up my entire, I have like 200 players on my phone. I've just kind of gone over, read about, watched them, and kind of just, what is the consensus here? What do I see about them? And Matt Goncalves, I think is what his name is, or maybe it's Goncalves, excuse me. I just watched him a couple days ago, and he's 6'6", 327 pounds. Doesn't have a great anchor, but he has a high IQ, excuse me. Great hands. The foot speed is really slow, which concerns me. He's built like a backup tackle, but then you look at him on his PFF grades, which aren't everything, mind you, but are a factor in the conversation. 77.3 pass block grade, pretty good. Above average by a lot, probably a B in regards to letter grades. Then you have a 69.6, so basically a 70 run block grade as well. So he's overall, production-wise, overall good tackle. Again, probably a backup tackle in the NFL. Again, because of the slow speed, not really much of an anchor to be discussed. But again, still, if you want a fine, solid backup tackle, could certainly be in that conversation to have. There have been some talks of Patrick Paul from Houston. He isn't on the board here, but for the sake of the offensive line talk, I do know San Francisco likes him a lot. I think Steph Sanchez said that one of his teammates said SF is in love with this guy. He's 6'7". He's 336 pounds, 36-inch arms. He's played almost 3,000 snaps in college football. Crazy traits, good athlete, an amazing pass protector. There is a lot to be improved upon when it comes to his run blocking, but overall, if Patrick Paul is someone they like from Houston, I could see them going in the second round with him. I'm trying to find Brandon Coleman on my board. If I can't add enough time, I'll talk about Bo Miller. Let's look at Bo Miller because I can't find Brandon Coleman as fast as I'd like to. Bo Limmer from Arkansas. We've hit him, I think, twice in our 3 mock drafts so far. He's a center. He's a guard. Good footwork, good hands, undersized. Let's be honest here. He's undersized. And I think that's going to cost him against bigger defensive tackles. Now, there is a conversation that, yes, you can get beat by bigger defensive tackles, but you could also win because you have instant leverage on them. But when it comes to in-pass blocking, the reason why he'll get beat by bigger defensive tackles is, yes, his size, but it's not just height and weight. It's you just don't have the anchor, and you can get bullied and pushed back against the bigger defensive tackle. He's a really good run blocker, though. There's technique. The effort is high. He has good play strength in run blocking, but pass blocking, there needs to be improvements there. I think in short yardage, his 10-yard split, his shuttle, it's above average. It's better than what most would be. But I also think Bo Limmer is kind of this high athletic player that you point to and say, man, like, you know, that guy can be something if you let him, right? Zach Zinter is also here on the board. See if I can find him really fast in my notes and don't keep you waiting. But Zach Zinter, Michigan, durable, reliable, 33 straight starts at Michigan. That said, he is recovering from a broken tibia and fibula, but he is someone, unlike Bo Limmer, can withstand a bull rush. Super strong upper body. The lower half is smaller and can throw his balance off somewhat, but great run blocker, excellent as a puller, has really good play strength against the run or blocking for the run. He has the ability to set up blocks and climb to the second level. Excellent hands to sustain blocks, but in short areas, the quickness, there is some, you would want more out of a player like him. I do think in pass protection, because there isn't that much quickness there, it would leave a little more to be wanted from him. But I think at pick 135, 132, which is where we're at now, you give me Zach Zinter over Isaiah Adams and Layden Robinson and Brandon Coleman. Like you have yourself a really good interior offensive lineman that I do think, in a year, once Banks is gone maybe, or once Feliciano is gone, could be your right guard of the future, left guard of the future. And you say, wow, it's not a left tackle. It's not, this amazing, star-studded, going to be this cornerstone player, but he'll be a player that has leadership. Zach Zinter is somebody that, not in how he plays, but in what he meant to Michigan reminds me of Joe Staley. And you'll hear Staley's name around Roger Rosengarten because he's coaching him. But I think in regards to leadership, likability, Zach Zinter's a player that I think it may have been the national title game, and I keep forgetting this. But when he got hurt, the entire stadium was chanting Zach, Zach, Zach. Like they rallied around him and said, "You mean so much to us. We want to show our appreciation for you." So I think San Francisco gets an absolute dog if they get Zach Zinter. I like Bo Limmer a lot. Limmer is ranked 140 on the big board here at PFN, and Zinter is ranked at 149. So pretty similar. Um, Limmer is more of a center than guard, whereas Zinter is simply guard. And I think would fit a lot. There isn't really anybody else you're like dying to take at 132. So for the sake of sparing you another hour on Zach Zinter, we'll take him here. Might be an overdraft, but I do think what we're getting in regards to leadership, value, fit within the system makes a lot of sense. But now we're at pick 135. We don't pick until 176, right? We do have a big space in between our next draft picks. As you can see here, it's been Johnny Newton, Ricky Pearsall, and Andrew Phillips. We have picks 135, 176, 211, and 115. Now, you can argue that you can trade pick 176 and 215 or 211 to get inside the 160s, and you kind of steal a prospect from somebody. I am someone that I don't love waiting this far for a tight end, but you have 176, which there's players like Eric All and Tip Ryman, Dallin Holker. I think all of those players I'd be okay taking. I think, unfortunately, for the Niners, this is a time where the running back conversation begins. Now, I won't take one here, but for the sake of conversation, Isaiah Davis is there, Blake Watson, Tyrone Tracy, Isaac Orendo. There is a lot of value. You can easily go Bo Miller here as well, or Bo Limmer here as well, and just go get yourself two kind of dogs on the interior. I won't do that for the sake of, drafting the same position over and over and over again. But let's look at edge, because with Larry Krueger, I talked about a player in Xavier Thomas, and it might be a little too early to take him here. I think 176 is kind of a sweet spot for him, but you don't pick for a long time. And I think, like Andrew Phillips, if there's a guy you like, you got to go get him. And I think the Niners are in a position, if they traded 124 away and couldn't get an edge rusher, that you'd want to find a guy that you value, that fits what you want to do defensively. I don't completely believe in a player like Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss, who's there. He's 6'3", 260 pounds, has a good build, but he's just someone that doesn't really have any pass rushing moves. He knows how to use his hands, which is really good for a player his size, but you just kind of sit back and you go, okay, you're 6'3", 260. He kind of has this like weird build of you're big and you're tall, but it's just a straight line of you don't have a swim move. You can't, there's no spin, there's no bend. You run straight, get to the quarterback, force guys inside, where I don't think San Francisco wants that in an edge rusher. I'm someone who doesn't buy into the idea that they would be like, yep, give us the non-bendy, non-athletic 6'3" guy. I think they would buy into more of a player like Javon Solomon, but even with Javon Solomon, there's a big caveat to his game. And I've talked about it plenty of times, but he's 6 foot. And when you're 6 foot, 246 pounds, a lot to like with you. Instant leverage. He has long arms. When you're 6 foot and you have 34-inch arms, you are just this weird build, hyper athletic, like super explosive, like the exact opposite of Cedric Johnson, who has extreme bend, or excuse me, Johnson, who doesn't have any bend. Solomon has all the bend, right? Um, I think when you get into a conversation of Javon Solomon, names like Yannick Ngakoue, Uchenna Nwosa, Josh Uche come to mind. Really good first step, pure pass rusher, 19% pass rush win rate, 16 sacks in 14 games. That's kind of where you're like, okay, there's a lot of production, but does your size translate to the NFL? That's certainly needs to be involved in how you scout him, look at him. Um, then there's a player like Mo Kamara, who I think the NFL, uh, the scouting world has kind of caught up to, or at least recently fallen in love with. That is because Mo Kamara is kind of like Javon Solomon, where Solomon's 6 foot, Kamara is 6'1", 248. Similar builds, similar bodies. Doesn't have great length like Solomon, although Solomon has 34-inch arms, but Kamara has the power. And again, it's just production monster at Colorado State. 5 years at Colorado State, 45 and a half tackles for losses, 30 and a half sacks, 5 forced fumbles. I mean, he's not this run defending edge setter, but when you talk about just he's always producing, you're like, holy crap. Like Mo Kamara, like sign me up for what that guy is selling, because whoever gets him, I have no idea if his size translates to the NFL, but they are going to get a guy that in 1, 2, 3 years' time, once he finds his role, like you're going to go, how did we let X team get this guy? Steal of the draft, steal of the round. Like, holy crap, that is his potential. All that said, I don't buy in, and I don't believe that San Francisco would draft a 6 foot player, a 6'1" player, despite everything I just said about Kamara and Solomon. I think a player like Xavier Thomas makes a lot of sense from Clemson. He's 6'2", so an inch, 2 inches taller than Solomon and Kamara are. 244, a little more slender build. Likely will have to play standing up, but has the flexibility to have his hand in the dirt. Isn't just a stand-up guy. Can be down there with his hand on line of scrimmage. Good burst, relentless. I've talked about him. I drafted him in my last mock. In the last 2 mocks, I picked him. Low floor, really high ceiling. He will be 25 this year, so you are getting a player that's been in college for a while, and he's older. He does have some leg injury history, which could ward off many teams, but I think you get him in a team where he doesn't have to be the guy. He can be the third, the fourth guy at the bench, and you're like, man, Arden Key, man, Clellan Ferrell last year before he got hurt, man, insert rotational piece you just look at and say, whoa, like he may not play, 35% of his snaps per season, but he will, when he plays, he gives us everything he's got. He can spare his health, but he will give us everything he has. You can argue it's too early for him. I'd probably concur with that. I think now, but Xavier Thomas certainly involved in the conversation at this point. Kyrie Jackson, who we do like a lot, from Oregon. You've already got Phillips. You've already got Johnny Newton. You've already gotten a receiver. Again, you can go best player available. I wouldn't be shocked at that. Nobody really stands out where I'm like, I gotta have that guy, which, like, unless you want to get a Kyrie Jackson, who I do think has the build of, at least physically, not potential, not production, but just like physically is built like a Richard Sherman, right? where you're like, man, like if he unlocks everything he can be, there's something special there. Um, but I do think when you're the Niners, you're at 135, like no player truly stands out at pick 135, but you are in a spot where you're likely going to have to quote unquote overdraft a tight end, overdraft the next player you like because you don't pick until the 41 picks later. Like there is going to be a massive stretch of like, what do we do here? Because we don't pick for a long time. Again, you have trade flexibility, but um, you might want to go linebacker. Let me see what I have on my notes just to be sure. If anyone I have on my notes sticks out. Not really. No one is like wowing me at this point. Like you're not getting Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State at pick 135. Like I like Tommy Eichenberg. He's a high floor, low ceiling, isn't athletic, but understands how to play linebacker, great run defender, can diagnose plays, can sit in the zone and put his arms out and knock a ball down here or there. I think his IQ makes up for his lack of athleticism, but nothing he does truly blows me away where I'm like, wow, that really stands out. It's like, no, like, you're fine. Like, I like what you're doing there, but like nothing really wows you, right? I think Eichenberg is a player that plays for the next 10 years in the NFL, is a starter, but you sit back and say, he wasn't great. He just slid on through, was consistent, was good. At pick 176, which we're not at yet, but we'll get there, I think a player like Maurice Luafa, I think is his name, maybe it's Luafau from Notre Dame. He's 6'2", 234 pounds, an 84.1 coverage grade, 68.5 run defense grade, and a 66.9 pass rush grade at linebacker. He is someone who is always around the ball. Now, when I read all that off to you, minus the pass rush, playmaker, always around the ball, likes to hit, wants to play more, wants to lay some wood. Reaction skills aren't perfect, but the instincts are there. What does that sound like to you? Take the linebacker away. That sounds like Talanoa Hufanga. And I say that because Maurice Luiafu, or Luiafu, however you say his name, no disrespect, looks just like Talanoa Hufanga. He's got the long hair, has the tribal tattoo. And you're just like, holy crap, can you play safety? Because, like, you have the instincts, you have the build, you're 6'2", 230 pounds. Like, man, like, can we get you on this team playing safety in the box, doing something for us? I just think you run the risk of missing out on good players like that if you don't overdraft them, whether it's Eichenberg or Thomas or Tip Ryman. I am someone, for the sake of getting my guy in this case, I am going to draft Tip Ryman, tight end. I know I just talked about edge rushers and linebackers, and I'm sure you're saying, seriously? Wasted all that time talking about Javon Solomon and Mo Kamara, but I just think there's so much more to Tip Ryman. And you can talk about Eric All. I don't like Jaheim Bell at all in this system, especially. I think Tip Ryman is a guy you point to and say, instant number 2 blocking tight end, but there is a little more with his game that can make him a good receiver. He's 6'5", 270, 33-inch arms, 10.5-inch hands. Weirdly enough, the second best athletic testing amongst tight ends in this class. He didn't catch the ball much, but despite his limited route tree, really good after the catch, excellent run blocker. There are some inconsistencies there, but he's a player that probably won't catch the ball more than like 30 times a season, but when he does, there's an impact involved. Where take the Chiefs, for example, take the Patriots in their heyday. They're pulling out tight ends. I'm talking pre-Gronk, pre-Hernandez, where you're like, who is that guy? And somehow, once a game, it's 3rd and 6, got to have it. He makes an amazing catch towards the sideline. You're like, how did you let that guy get open? Tip Ryman, who names their kid Tip, how did he beat us, right? And all of a sudden, he's on SportsCenter's top 10 plays of like, Brock Purdy clinches a Super Bowl with the touchdown throw to Tip Ryman on 3rd and 6 after getting hammered by Chris Jones. And you're like, Tip who? Tip Ryman? Like, man, I'm going to take Tip Ryman here. It sounds nutty. It sounds crazy, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think San Francisco would value him. Eric All from Iowa, there's a lot of injury history there. It's an Iowa tight end. There's George Kittle ties. I get that, but give me Tip Ryman at pick 135. Again, it's probably an overdraft. I'm aware of that, but I want to get my guys. I want to get the guys that I think San Francisco points to and says, oof, like, you're not just going to help us now. You're going to help us in the future. And I think a player like Tip Ryman, a player, if he's still there, in Xavier Thomas, would almost definitely help us. Bo Limmer just went to Denver. It's a good pick for them. Xavier Thomas is still on the board, crossing our fingers he's still there in the next 30-ish picks. We will obviously wait and see. The Jets are on the board now. They go Christian Jones from Texas. I love that move from them. And we'll see what else transpires here once the Broncos pick at 150. They do not go Xavier Thomas, which they go Zion Tapolo-Fatui. Again, I like our draft so far. And look, everybody and their mother will like their own mock draft. We know this. Everyone says, look what I did. I made the Niners better. We all think that. That's how it is. But I think when you look at like this entire process, I have been trying to get into the mind of Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch. And I can be so wrong here, and I'll sit back and say, what was I thinking come this weekend, right? Once the draft occurs, and we sit back and go, wow, bad pick. Like last year, nobody in their mother thought they were going to pick Cam Latu. And I sat here and I said, what in the world? Cam who? Cam Latu, bona fide, vanilla tight end, ain't worth the you-know-what, and I hope Cam Latu is great. But we'll dive into all these picks once they happen because, oh my goodness, like the Niners have a tendency to just surprise everybody. And you're sitting back like, a kicker? Cam Latu, a tight end that most people haven't even heard of, a convert from defense. So everything's on the table. Isaac Guerendo goes to the Cowboys, and of course, as always, right in front of me, right in front of us, Xavier Thomas goes to the Denver Broncos. And there's one reason why I love that, because it makes you stay on your toes. And I think in the NFL draft, you have an idea as to what other players, other teams might want and their needs are, but you just never know. And so now we have to pivot. And again, we have no edge rushers. Mo Kamara is still on the board. We don't pick till 211. That's the price you have to pay when you overdraft a player. Like Tip Ryman, tight end. But I do think that let's look at Brennan Jackson from Washington State, who isn't Cedric Johnson, who isn't Mo Kamara. He's 6'4", 264 pounds, high effort, violent hands, inconsistent strength, but he's a good enough run defender. Sometimes gets overeager, won't always set the edge. That kind of scares me away from him as a draft pick or potential prospect to draft. But I do think would be a rotational piece. Couldn't be a bona fide number 2 opposite Bosa, but certainly could be Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, Brendan Jackson. There definitely is guys you can point to and say, okay, you make a lot of sense. A player like Miles Cole, who probably too early for him here, but he's 6'6", 280 pounds, 6-year senior from Texas Tech. Insane length, but this lacks strength. He'd probably need 2 to 3 years to really pop and become, an NFL caliber player. High effort though, quick off the ball, there are some questions as to when you're 6'6", 280, you played 6 years in college. Why do you only have a career high of 3.5 sacks? Like, what are we missing with you? So there are those questions to be had in regards to Miles Cole. Um, but again, Mo Kamara is there. I don't know if he fits what San Francisco wants to do. I have no idea. But I do think the Niners of teams, like I just imagine him with Chris Kosaric, and you're just like, oh, like you let arguably one of the best edge rushers stay on the board. Like, man, like you just vulture, sit there on the board this long. All that to say, I have a sneaky feeling pick 176 is not going to be an edge rusher. And I think when the Niners signed two edge rushers in free agency, it doesn't remove the idea. But, and again, had Xavier Thomas been here, he was our target, right? I think now's a time where the Tyrone Tracy conversation starts to begin of, do you want to go running back? But I think with Devondre Campbell, who is on a 1-year contract, with Dre Greenlaw, torn Achilles, you hope he gets back. You like him a lot. Will he ever be the same? You hope so. We're all rooting for him to come back and be the same, right? Like I said with Tommy Eichenberg and Maurice Luafau, this team doesn't need a linebacker, but on the off chance Greenlaw just isn't the same player, you get me a person, a prospect like Tommy Eichenberg, who I think in the 5th round, late 5th round, mind you, like I, I'd have a hard time sitting back and being like, why don't you pick, or like, why would you pass on Tommy Eichenberg? Like, you're getting a good player that I think when you talk about steals, my guys, a player you point to and say, oh, man, like kind of like Mo Kamara, right? We're like, Mo Kamara is getting more eyes towards him because of the production, whereas Tommy Eichenberg is boring. He's not going to blow you away, but if you want to categorize him as vanilla, you want him to be the vanilla in the sherbet, right? You're like, I got the other flavors with Dre Greenlaw, with Fred Warner, with the rest of my defense. Sometimes just the vanilla complements everything else. And I think Tommy Eichenberg is a player you point to and say, man, the vanilla's hitting pretty good right now. Like, there's nothing wrong with vanilla when it's a complement to what you already have, the flavors in the building you already got. And I'm sure if you're watching this, listening to this, tomorrow morning on Tuesday, like, I'm sure you're pounding the table saying, pick my guy, pick Mo Kamara. And I so get it. I love Mo Kamara. But I think the Niners aren't picking a linebacker come round 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? At least I don't think so. But I think Tommy Eichenberg, who's sitting right there at 178, and we're sitting at 176, it's like the perfect marriage of players. Again, I also love Maurice Luafau. He's a little more raw, but I'm going to go Tommy Eichenberg here. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just letting you know what's up of what I would do. Maurice Luafau goes to the Patriots, so obviously there was another team thinking linebacker just behind us. So it may have been the best value at the time. You can pin it on me. You can tag me on Twitter. You can message me on Instagram saying, what are you doing? But I do think of the picks we have made so far, Johnny Newton, Ricky Pearsall, Phillips, Zach Zinter, and Tommy Eichenberg, I can argue that Newton, year 1 starter. Pearsall, year 1 contributor, year 2 potential starter. Phillips, year 1 contributor, could be a year 1 starter. Zach Zinter could step in year 1 and you'd love him, but you likely want him year 2 as a starter. Tip Ryman, instant tight end 2, amazing blocker. You'd love him now. Instant impact player. Tommy Eichenberg, probably not going to play much this year as Mo Kamara goes to the Rams. I'm going to go find a ledge and jump off it right now because that sickens me. But again, Tommy Eichenberg, who we like a lot, can fill that. He's better than D. Winters now. He's better than Jalen Graham. He will give you more comfortability having to start than Demetrius Flanagan Falls. He isn't the most athletic. He's not going to, who is this guy? He's super strong, super fast. It's not him. But he's solid. And I think sometimes you just want to have consistency. Tommy Eichenberg, where D. Winters might do this, DFF might do this, other players in the 5th, 6th round might give you the roller coaster. Tommy Eichenberg's just chugging along. Chugga. Like, he's just going along, the little engine that could. And you're like, how does he keep doing this? He doesn't look like a linebacker in regards to the traits he has, but he produces like a solid NFL player. You can look at edge again. Eric Watts is there. I think you're at a point where you're going to really overdraft a player. If you look towards the edge rushers now, there aren't many that I like at this point. You can look at Gabriel Murphy from UCLA, 6'2", 246 pounds, 87.6 pass rush grade. He's compact, but doesn't have strength. He's not going to push back the offensive line, not going to give you that pressure. He has really quick feet. He can play standing up or hand in the ground. He really can't win in close quarters. He has, and I'm not kidding, 0 width, 99 percentile is incredible, one of a kind. He has 0 width percentile arm length as an edge rusher. That is the opposite spectrum of one of a kind in a bad way, playing edge rusher. He has a plan when it comes to attacking offensive linemen, but there is some concerns of okay, well, if you can't get into them, if you don't have the arm length to push them off and get inside their chest and, get a hand on them, you're not going to win. You're going to lose. All that said, 77.1 run defense grade and a 18.4% pass rush win rate. So despite the kind of lack of athletic tools he has, he's somehow winning. I don't understand it. That's just I don't know how you do it, man, but you're doing it. Which again is really confusing to me, but if sometimes there are anomalies there. Murphy is certainly at times an anomaly. You can look at safety here. Again, you're at pick 211, you pick at 215. There's not if you're looking for a safety, I'm looking at players like Cole Bishop from Utah, Jaden Hicks, Tyke Smith, who I already mentioned earlier. Middle round guys, Javon Bullard, who is already off the board. Tyler Nubin, I would stay away from. He's really slow. Kalen Bullock, Darian Taylor Demerson, who isn't on the board from what I can see right here on PFN. He's someone I'd like to take at this point, but he's long gone in the 6th round at pick 211. Other than that, you can look at Dominique Hampton, who a 6-year player. He has good size, consistent tackler, conservative kind of player. Not really a playmaker, but he plays the game really safe. I could see San Francisco late in the draft saying, you know what, kind of like Tommy Eichenberg, you're not gonna be a ball hawk. You're not gonna be this Talanoa Funga Jair Brown. Take a risk, make a big play. You aren't that player, but in the 6th round, you can sell me on conservative player, plays the game smart, high IQ, is someone that if he had to play in the NFL, his only detriment might be, can you be more aggressive, which that can hopefully be taught and brought out of him. But a player like Dominique Hampton, again, he's smart, 6-year player at Washington. He's someone you can point to and say, yep, that guy is not going to blow you away, but he's also not going to kill you. He's not going to crush your draft hopes and dreams when he's there in the 6th round and you're he's not going to be a massive steal, but he's a guy you can easily see having a 6 to 8 year career in the NFL and just being a constant either placeholder safety or a solid backup for a really long time. And that's Dominique Hampton. Certainly on the board for me at this point. But let's look at all in regards to players. Joe Milton's there. We're not taking him. I know Dallin Hoker's here. And he is someone that if you didn't take Tip Ryman earlier, you certainly could target here. I like Dallin Holker a lot. I don't think they're going to go and get another tight end. That would be kind of foolish to me. But I do think San Francisco would want to insulate here. And I think we've gotten a guard from Zach Zinter from Michigan. And I think getting a player that San Francisco likes a lot, they've talked to a lot, that pick 211 would be Caden Wallace from Penn State. Again, there are times late in drafts you will risk it and say, like a Dre Greenlaw, like D. Winters, for example, at linebacker, right? That, fifth round picks, Winters a little later than that, but, late round picks, day 3 picks, you point to and say, like, there's something in them. Can we bring it out of them? There are other players that you want to draft that are just the constant, consistent, get the job done. You're not going to kill me. It could be a lifelong backup, but you can insulate me. And if a player like Colton McKivitz goes down, Trent Williams goes down, you can give me flexibility where I'm not, horrified if you're playing. I think Caden Wallace is that. He's 6'5", 314 pounds, a 72.8 pass block grade, 69.1 zone block grade, 67 run block grade, 4-year starter at right tackle, high floor, lower ceiling kind of guy, master of none, jack of all trades. You could think of him as a swing tackle, so maybe in 2 years' time, he is your Colton McKivitz, where he's backing up the next left tackle. Maybe he's backing up Trent this year and next year, but I think at 211, I would love getting Caden Wallace here. I think he fits your need, he fits your want, and I think it's a position where you've already taken a liking to him, but also I think they've had 1 to 2 visits with him already. So you like him, he's there on the board, you're not getting in too early. We're going to go ahead and take Caden Wallace from Penn State. Probably a right tackle in the NFL, but I do think if you told me this year that, hey, we are going to alleviate the idea of Jalen Moore ever playing for you again, I would say, please, I need that, please. Niner Media says this on the comments. I really do agree. He says that just not a kicker. Don't give me a kicker in the 3rd round. And I agree, because Jake Moody, that pick, you can justify it. They'll do it. He was fine come playoff time for the most part. I think San Francisco walks into this year with a question mark-ish at kicker still, so who knows? But I think you got into offensive linemen, you've insulated there, and you're back on the board at pick 215. Now, I talked about getting the consistent player, the instant backup can insulate you. It's not going to kill you, that you like. He'll come in. He's not going to make you sweat. Clean things up. Doesn't have a high ceiling. There's a player in this draft from Iowa on the board still. He plays defensive tackle. Okay. He's 6'5", massive height, 281 pounds. That is the height of a defensive tackle, but still really tall. You want your DTs around 6'3", 6'4" at the most. So he's super tall. Then you have 281 pounds. That's super thin. Where it's like if you were 6'5", 330, you're like you are a hulking man who can take up two offensive linemen, whether it's a guard and a center. Like you can just take over 2 offensive linemen with these, and you can just take on double teams easily for me. But Logan Lee from Iowa, he's a player that you draft and develop, and you say there's a lot of potential there. What can we make of you? Really great strength, but doesn't have the length you want for his size. Former tight end and wrestler. So there is this, he's a fighter, he's a mauler, he's a masher, he won't quit, high effort kind of energy. had an 80.4 run defense grade, so could be a good run defender going forward because of his size. Had a 7.6 pass rush win rate and a 5.3% run stop rate. So there's potential, but it really just lacks productivity. It had a 70.4 pass rush grade per PFF. So there is a lot of strengths there that I can see San Francisco taking a liking to and saying, you know what, like Nick Zakel a couple of years ago, like you're not going to play in year one. You're not going to play in year two. But I do think that, give Chris Kosaric a year or two with the kid. I think Logan Lee, if everything goes his way, you're kind of taken aback of like, wow, like where'd this guy come from? And I think he's not going to be this amazing player. He's not going to just, he's not going to be starter for you. But I think rotational piece, rushing downs, a guy you put in there and say, play next to Johnny Newton in a year or two, play next to Javon Hargrave, come be my run stuffing defensive tackle, right? Where again, he's a weird size, 6'5", 281, where you're like, whoa, like that makes no sense. Like he's not productive, but he's a player that you're like, okay, well, if you want to go back to receiver, I am someone who has taken a liking to Josh Cephas, as my dog shakes his head. If you heard that on the stream or on the podcast, he got his shots today and is doing just fine. If you're asking, which you're not, but if you are, you can all wish Stanley a happy day, if you will. But Josh Cephas from UTSA, I mentioned this on, it may have been the last mock draft. It was certainly on the Krug show with Larry Krueger, but Josh Cephas has the build, the makeup, the potential, if all goes right, to be the next Juwan Jennings. Now, there is a player like Jordan Whittington from Texas that also fits that mold. He is gone, but Joshua Cephas really fits that mold. He's 6'3", 185, had 52.1% of his yardage last year be after the catch. He's big, he's fast, can make the first guy miss consistently. He's someone that is just a crazy good blocker, whether it's in the running game, in space. Like, the route tree is limited, but he's a player that you're okay, like, not being an impact player in a year. Like, Juwan Jennings wasn't really this massive impact player. He made impacts later in the season, but instantly you were like, Juwan Jennings, 7th round pick, we'll see. Now, we all love Juwan. 3rd and Juwan's a legend here. Had a crazy playoff run. We love Juwan Jennings, but in 1 year time could be gone. I know San Francisco isn't in the business of always drafting a player ahead of time with that player still in the building, especially at receiver. But I think Josh Cephas is one where you probably wouldn't want to keep 2 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" receivers on the roster who do things very similarly. So it kind of feels like Josh Cephas kind of a year too early for the Niners. But I like him a lot. I think he can be a stash player for a year, and I don't think you'd lose him. I also think if you got 2 big receivers on your roster, someone always happens to get hurt. Like, why not take the risk? Now, Ryan Flournoy is here on the board still from Southeast Missouri State. Quick feet, good route runner, 6'1", 200 pounds, 10-inch hands, 6-year college player. He'll be 25, has 4.4 speed. Kind of like Cephas, a practice squad stash where 2-3 years down the road is making an impact on the team, on the roster. But again, I think both those guys would be in play at pick 215. You pick it 251. I think it would, if this is even the right usage of the word, I think it would behoove us to go back to Dominique Hampton. Because like I said, you can go Logan Lee, go the experimental route. San Francisco, John Lynch said today, They don't mind doing that if potential's on the board. It is. But I think Dominic Hampton is someone if you let and don't pick him here, he'll fall. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's already off the board at this point in the draft come this weekend. But again, he's a safe pick, super conservative player. But if you put him next to a player like Hufanga, or like Jair Brown, who will take risks, who can be a little wild, I think in a weird way, think of it this way, where the past 2 years, it's been Tashawn Gibson and Hufanga. Conservative, veteran player, takes good angles to the ball, is a good tackler, not going to get many picks, so kind of let the game come to him rather than kind of take the game to itself or take himself to the game. I think, in a year where Hufanga could play a lot, could be on and off the field consistently, you just don't know with Talanoa Hufanga. I think getting a player in the building now where Gibson is not retired but hasn't returned just yet, kind of waiting if he wants to play. Logan Ryan has officially retired. Hufanga is, again, injured. Who knows how the impact is. Jair Brown is your starting free safety as of this point. But give me a 6-year college player with good size, consistent tackler, can make up for the aggressiveness of Jair Brown, of Hufanga. We're going to go Dominic Hampton from Washington. Not a ball hawk, just an overall good player, consistent. And you really don't have any safeties. Like, again, Mo Kamara goes to the Rams and Logan Lee goes to the Rams. Sean McVay may be in my head. They may be having the draft the Niners will actually have and getting all these experimental, shorter than massive human beings that you're just like, wow. But back to Dominic Hampton. I think of the safeties, and there's better ones in the class. I'm not saying he's the end-all be-all, but I think of the safeties in the class, again, he doesn't have the ranginess that Bullock or Javon Bullard have. He doesn't have the thumping in the box kind of play like Jaden Hicks has. He doesn't have the ranginess, the speed, this high ceiling like Tyke Smith or Malik Mustafa have. He's just, again, good player. If he has to play this year, he'll be a rookie. But the ceiling isn't high, but the floor is not low. And I think in a year where San Francisco, you're taking a lot of players that will set you over the top for sure. Pearsall, Newton, Phillips. You also have to find, players that can continue building the foundation of your roster once you can't afford to pay players. Like this draft, and we've gotten to the point of this an hour and a half into it, where this draft, you have 10 picks. Do you make all of them? We shall see. But I think you had the ability to do both of the necessary, dare I say, I don't want to say needs, but you have the ability to complete the tasks, the 2 tasks you have to complete. Like there are 2 paths. You can finish this one and finish that one. You have 2 quests. You can complete both in one draft. One is simply getting better, younger at the top. Johnny Newton, Ricky Pearsall, Andrew Phillips. The other one is you're going to have to pay a lot of players. Lenore, Mooney Ward, Hufanga, Aaron Banks, Juwan Jennings. If Aiyuk plays in the 5th-year option, Aiyuk, Brock Purdy. And there are some of those guys, like Purdy, you're going to prioritize, which is going to make you lose players like Hufanga, like Lenore, like Mooney Ward. You have the ability to insulate the foundation of your roster where in a time where many of the fans, including myself, were like, this could be it for the core, for Warner and Kittle and Deebo and Aiyuk and Purdy. Like some of those players aren't going to be here next year. And that's just the NFL. And Aiyuk couldn't, maybe gone this week for all we know. I don't think it'll happen, but you never know. I think you can complete 2 of the things you really want to do. And I think in this draft so far, we can check our picks really quick here. Johnny Newton, Ricky Pearsall, Andrew Phillips, Zach Zinter, Tip Ryman, Tommy Eichenberg. We were going to get Xavier Thomas and didn't. We have no edge rushers on the board yet. Caden Wallace, Dominic Hampton, like you've done that. Now, you can argue that Sterling, again, no edge rushers. What are you doing? We tried. They weren't there. Didn't want to overdraft some players. I would say that in a place, Tip Ryman, 135, just screams edge rusher. But I didn't want to miss out on getting a player like Tip Ryman to aid George Kittle. Kittle's getting old. You have to have the ability to say in 2-3 years' time, are you comfortable once Kittle gets hurt? Kittle gets hurt, not a lot, but he gets hurt. And I think the Niners put themselves in a place with this mock draft that you're really, really comfortable. I don't see any edge rushers I like here. Going back to pick 251, Gabriel Murphy's there. The 0th percentile arm length scares me away. You can go Jalen Harrell. I don't love him, to be honest with you. You know what? Here's Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And I didn't think he was on the board still, which may have saved our entire mock draft. May have saved me from saying, no edge rushers. What the heck? I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who I have here in my notes, which, look at this. PFN has a player on their big board at 372. And me, little old me, has notes on this man. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, 6'5", 250 pounds, 6-year senior, high upside athlete, high motor, can set the edge with heavy hands. Probably a 3-4 outside linebacker. Won't lie there, but with him getting back to the Fangio scheme, I can see them mixing in a standing up linebacker here or there, hence Xavier Thomas, maybe a Javonte Jean-Baptiste. You wish there was more power, but I do think 7th round, he would need a little more, 1 or 2 years, get himself in NFL shape. I think he is someone that would fit the mold of a Logan Lee, that they're a project that he needs 2-3 years. Like take Robert Beal Jr. last year for the Niners. Speed rusher, wasn't going to impact this year, but year 2, year 3, you're expecting something where, okay, 2 years, the year of his contract year in 2 or 3 years' time, okay, like you've proven yourself to be a valuable piece of the edge rushing rotation. We'll sign you for 2 more years. We like you a lot. I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste could be that on the Niners, especially if they want to integrate some of the Fangio style of defensive scheme, stand-up linebackers. Again, there's questions of fit, but I think that could definitely be an option for the Niners. At pick 251, we've taken Jaden Cromartie a lot in the past 2 mock drafts from Mississippi State. I would not be against it again. You get 2 defensive tackles. You would continue to push Khalid Davis and Kevin Givens down the board. I like Kevin Givens. Kevin Givens can start for you on the off day when Collins isn't playing or Newton isn't there, but you've already taken Newton. You walk into the year with Hargrave, Newton, Givens, Khalid Davis, Jordan Elliott. You have 5 guys. Do you want a 6th? You can take Cromartie for sure. I'd love that pick. We've taken it twice, so I will leave that on the board as a potential option for the Niners. I know they just signed Trent Taylor, or re-signed him, I guess you could say. And he's kind of that, low ceiling punt returner. You're comfortable with him. You don't hate it. I would have rather, let's say we didn't go Tip Ryman at 135 or Tommy Eichenberg, players like Taj Washington, if you want to get nuts, I can see them utilizing a player like Malachi Corley in the new kick return rule. Like there are there's going to be more of this. Let's use a back at kick return because of the new rules. Let me see if I have Tejon Palmer on my board. But I do think that there are going to, like, this year we are going to see, whether it's late round, middle rounds, we are going to see some teams target an actual like project, but someone that is going to instantly impact special teams, like Anthony Gould from Oregon State, who 2 years ago was the first team all returner in college football and has been a great punt returner for Oregon State. I don't know if you're in the business of taking just a returner, but we just talked about teams are going to prioritize running backs, the actual returners in this draft. And come pick 251, you can definitely, sell me on that. You'd walk into the year with, let's see here, Deebo, Aiyuk, Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, Ronnie Bell, Danny Gray, Chris Conley. Like, you walk into the year with a pretty solid grouping. I can tell you now, San Francisco is out on Danny Gray. He will have to fight and claw his way onto this roster. But Ronnie Bell, who last year wasn't a great punt returner, but has experience back there. You would have Ricky Pearsall, who I believe has at least some experience back there. I could be wrong. Then you'd have running backs from, like, you can find somebody out there that's a UDFA to sign. And you also have players like Aiyuk and Deebo and McCaffrey, if you want to get crazy with it, that can do returns. Right now, I'm kind of in between on who to draft, whether it's Javonte Jean-Baptiste to fill the edge rusher. Do you want to just draft a edge rusher who's a project to see if he can fit your scheme in 2 or 3 years? Like, there's no promise Brandon Staley's even here in 2 to 3 years, but teams don't draft like that. Or do you want to go Anthony Gould, who is just an instant all-pro first-team punter or punt returner and returner? I think that just screams Niners, but I know I can see it in your eyes. You can't see it in my eyes, but I can see it in your eyes. You're saying, you didn't draft an edge rusher. You dummy. You idiot. You know nothing. They'll never do that. It's like, you're probably right. But I didn't say this was the most accurate mock draft. I said it was the final mock draft. I said the most accurate one was 2 mock drafts ago. So go check that out for accuracy. But I think at this point, you want to get a player that has potential to be a receiver, but solidified position on your roster, gives you high upside. I think Anthony Gould, again, first team all-team returner 2 years ago. And he can return punts. San Francisco just lost McLeod. They have a low ceiling guy in Trent Taylor, who I get the team likes. Quality time is back, but Anthony Gould will give you upside at the position. Well, words are hard. Look at what PFN says. He's 5'8", 174, tiny guy. But after the yards per catch, 17. 3 touchdowns. Like, he is someone that, again, the role he's going to have is limited, but he fills a need. At pick 251, not many teams can say that. Like Matt Barrows, who I love, David Lombardi, who I love. They got Bub Means, other receivers going. I think we have one. I know there's no edge rusher. Forgive me. Don't crucify me. I don't want to see me stuck in a freaking Glad trash bag with the Force Flex Plus drawstring. Like, don't kill me. Easter's over, folks. Don't crucify me. Like, give me a break. But I think so far we have one. We have one. As of right now, April 22nd, 2024, before any games have been played, me and you, Niner fans, I have constructed the greatest roster of all time. We have won the Super Bowl. There's no need to even play the season. Give us a Lombardi trophy, and I hope to God you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. But I think of our mock drafts we have done, I think this, for different reasons, like there are other mock drafts we've done where I've taken Javon Solomon, I've taken Mo Kamara, I've taken Xavier Thomas. Those are all players that I like. I don't want you to look at this and say, well, you didn't pick my guy, I don't like them. Over the next couple days, if you've made it this far into the mock draft, I am going to be putting out film, my scouting reports on a lot of players, including many of them on the board right now. And I think, as you build up to Thursday, I'm excited, you're excited, but the Niners, if this is their 2024 draft class, how are you feeling? Pick 31, Johnny Newton, defensive tackle, Illinois, traded up to pick 55 for Florida receiver Ricky Pearsall, pick 94, cornerback Andrew Phillips from Kentucky. At pick 132, Zach Zinter from Michigan. At pick 135, Tip Ryman, tight end from Illinois. At pick 176, Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State. At pick 211, Caden Wallace, offensive tackle, likely a right tackle from Penn State. Pick 215, Dominic Hampton from Washington, a safety. And from Oregon State, at pick 251, Anthony Gold, a return specialist to round out the 2024 NFL draft class. We'll break down what actually happens later this weekend. I cannot wait. I am excited. And look, like I said, I have like 200 prospects in this phone right in front of me. And I'll tell you what, if you want a place to listen and watch along with the NFL mock draft, it's not here, unfortunately, but go to 95.7 The Game. I will be leading their draft analysis on YouTube, Twitch, and the Odyssey app, and live on your radio. 95.7 The Game, starting at 6 p.m. on Thursday, all the way until 10 p.m., breaking down every single first-round pick, potential trades, and having a ton of fun doing so with Evan Giddings and Mark Grandy. I cannot wait. The Niners have a chance to just wipe the board clean of last year, build for the future, and construct a roster ready to contend again this season. If this is it for the core, I hope this mock draft is enough to give them one final chance at a Lombardi trophy and hopefully win it all when this year is all said and done. I hope you like the mock draft. If you don't, tell me why in the comments below on YouTube, Facebook, and X or Twitter. You can follow us on social media at 49ers.access. That's the Instagram. 49ers_access is the Twitter. You can also use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off, whether it's a MLB game, NBA playoff game, or you want to hurry up and buy some NFL tickets cheaper by using our promo code for $20 off. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And I'll just tell you this. Happy draft season. The NFL season is almost here. We've almost made it to a new Niner year. Last year was so hard. Hopefully, this year's draft can revitalize your love and get you back into football. And hopefully, come next February, we're sitting back saying, it all started in April when Sterling Bennett put together the most accurate and perfect mock draft on the market, better than everybody else's. I should have followed that guy the entire time. But in all seriousness, thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and listening. I really appreciate it so much. And as always, until next time, stay faithful.